Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of VCTV. I'm your host, Kyle Ellicott, and we're going to be speaking today about the future of travel and transportation, a relevant topic for recent news where Jeff Bezos will visit outer space here in the next few weeks with a few lucky individuals, beginning and kicking off the race to space tourism. Now, is that the future of travel, or is it going to be hypersonic flight where we'll get from London to New York City in a matter of 30 minutes to 40 minutes? Or are we all just going to be riding scooters around cities? What is next? That is what we're going to be talking about today and much more, including potentially the future of cities. And I'm joined today by some outstanding friends from around the industry and co-hosts who are all investors and experts within this area. And we'll get to their introductions here in just a moment. But before we do, big thank you to you all for tuning in. As audience members, we do have the comments box open. Feel free to ask your questions, say hello from where you may be tuning into the world, and also make sure to share and subscribe today's episode. Big shout out as well to the Token team, to Maria and Hasmik for making today's episode possible. With that, let's go ahead and kick it off today. Tushar, if you can, start us off, a little introduction and background for everybody.
Thank you, Kyle. I myself, Tushar Kansal from Kansaltancy Ventures. In my previous life, I've worked for the private equity practice at Deloitte and Touche. I've also been part of the team at Brand Capital, which is India's largest venture capital fund by the number of deals. I've headed treasury of a $3 billion company, raised $2.5 billion for them, and I was CFO with a logistics company owned by Guggenheim Partners. In the last 7-8 years, I am into venture capital. I'm personally an investor in 4 companies, but my company, we handhold startups and VC funds raise funding. So we do a lot of funding for VC funds, and we also help startups get access to capital. So this is about me. Thank you, Kyle, for having me here today.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us as well. Bryony, welcome to the show. First time. It's an absolute pleasure to have you. A little intro and a little background for those who may not know you.
Thank you, Kyle. Very happy to be here. So I'm Bryony Cooper. I'm one of the managing partners at Arkley Brink VC, and we're an early stage fund based in Warsaw in Poland, but I'm actually most of the time living in Berlin in Germany. And actually, I've been in VC for the last few years, but before that, I was a startup co-founder and CEO. And in fact, my most prominent startup was in the smart mobility and transportation sector, which hopefully I'll be able to share some good insights with you today. But in our venture capital fund today, we invest in a lot of different topics in the deep tech space, from smart cities to hardware and IoT, with a special focus on sustainability. So hopefully that will be a nice topic today as well.
Absolutely. And again, welcome, first-time guest with us here today. And last but not least, Dr. Srikant, welcome back to the show. A little intro, a little background for everybody.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be a diversified panel, and I happen to be on the other side of the table, advising family offices, especially on the legal aspects of an investment. I also happen to be a finance professional, so it's a blend of finance as well as legal. So they do ask me about certain investments that they make, whether it makes financial sense, and I do give give a little piece of advice or make some passing comments, so on and so forth. I have written close to about 500 term sheets till now, and in the process of writing a few more. So that's me.
Wonderful. Outstanding panel. Bryony, let's kick it off with you. I mean, where are we today with the state of transportation and travel? I mean, being a former executive in the mobility space, now looking at deep tech, I'm sure you're seeing everything with, as you mentioned, with the Internet of Things, from connected cars and mobility to artificial intelligence and autonomous driving. So talk to us a little bit what you and your partners are starting to see at the general landscape of transportation and mobility.
Yeah. I think automation has been a hot topic for so many years now, and actually it's taking a long time to actually commercialize. So I think a lot of people are eager to see autonomous vehicles on the road, but I think it's still going to be a few years before that happens. And back when I was working in the mobility sector with my startup, there was a lot of aggregation going on because, when it comes to transportation sector, things are quite fragmented still. If I want to go from my home to the airport and I need several different routes to get there, maybe a taxi to a train. You still have to book everything separately. So I think a few years ago, people started looking more at integration and how can we consolidate these different types of transportation for the individual. But then, of course, the pandemic came as well. So I think people's travel habits changed a little bit then. Of course, global travel had to shut down a lot. And then people were a lot more focused on individual travel, but also still boosting the sharing economy. So the things like e-scooters and e-bikes, at least in the cities where I'm based, have been really, really booming. And there's been some huge investments going into those sectors.
And we saw a lot of that pre-pandemic as well. And just kind of curious, do you see that as potentially a growing trend that will have more intercity, quick transportation or last mile, as it was referred to for some time? Is that something we're going to continue to see, or do you see cities pushing back on that? And the only reason I ask is we did have some cities in the US, there were some cities in Asia as well, where scooters and e-bikes and those types of things were very popular for a little bit, kind of pushed back maybe rules, regulations, everyone trying to figure out where to ride them, sidewalks versus the street, et cetera. So any ideas to how you see that kind of rolling out more aggressively in the next year or two?
Yeah, so actually when this trend first came about, I didn't think it was going to last very long for exactly the reasons that you've mentioned. I had seen photos from some Asian countries of sharing bikes basically piled up in mountains on the side of the pavement and really were becoming a nuisance. So I think there has to be a lot of thought and strategy into the rollout of these types of concepts. But still, more players keep popping up. So it seems like it's still popular at the moment in many cities. But I think that in the future, the focus will be a lot more on what's sustainable, what's contributing to pollution in the cities. And so if we can get more electric mobility, whether that's through e-scooters or through electric cars, that will definitely be progress. But yeah, as you mentioned, they do certainly come with their problems. And of course, it's also limited to big cities. This is no good in the countryside, and it's never going to be able to work outside of the major urban hubs.
And the data, which I want to come back to, Bryony, I want to make sure Dr. Srikant and Tushar get some thoughts in here, but I want to talk a little bit more on data with you here in a moment, specifically because, again, being an executive in the space, having seen that side, also the Internet of Things side, there's so much data and potential with this future of mobility we're moving into, good, bad, and potentially ugly, that can help reshape and define how our cities are constructed going forward as well. But we're going to come back to that. So I'll give you a little prep time there. Tushar, talk to us a little bit about your view of what you're seeing in the future of travel and transportation. Space tourism. Is this the new? Are we all going to be traveling to space next week? Or what do you see as kind of the future of travel and transportation?
So, on the space side, tourism is something, of course, which a lot of companies are working. Not too many of them, but the prominent ones are, of course, Richard Branson and Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk. On the other side, a trend has taken shape that earlier we used to have heavier satellites placed in geostationary orbit of 36,000 kilometers. And off late, they have been replaced. There is a trend towards replacing them with CubeSats, which are small 50 kg, 100 kg satellites, and having a number of them at around 700 kilometers to 1,000 kilometers orbit. This is so that so that the rocket expense can come down, because it takes a lot of money to put satellites into geostationary orbit, and that has prompted satellites which can put in orbit a lower stationary orbit. 100 satellites in one go, 200 satellites in one go, and a lot of records have been created in the Indian side by ISRO. They put in orbit more than 108 satellites through one rocket. And that trend, in a way, goes side by side with the trend of putting tourists on space. So what Jeff Bezos is doing is he will stay in space for a very short time, feel the weightlessness and the view of Earth, and then it won't be like too high. It would be, I think, 700 kilometers or 1,000 or slightly less than that. So, and this has prompted a number of startups to create cheaper rockets which can put such small satellites into the lower orbits. And along with that goes providing Wi-Fi internet through these satellites, and that's what recently Jeff Bezos, SpaceX, and OneWeb, the UK company, they have applied to the Indian government to allow satellites beamed through their satellites, and the third application came in today. So it's a that is something which has high visibility because it is related to space and very exciting. On the shared mobility side, as we were discussing here, so see, Asian countries have seen shared mobility before. So if you go to Bangkok or Jakarta or some Southeast Asian, they have these shared mobility since a long time. So it's a matter of culture, and once it catches up, of course, because of COVID, it might catch up a bit slow now, but the benefit of shared mobility is for everyone to see in terms of the money you shell out. So that is something which will forever be there.
You're absolutely right, and we're starting to see a little bit of change around the world in that effort. And Dr. Srikant, I want to come to you next. What are you seeing on a global scale, but maybe even more particularly in India? How are you seeing the future of transportation and travel start to change here today in 2021, and maybe looking a little forward as well?
It may be quite a lengthy answer, Kyle, because when you talk about transport, we're talking about many cogs in the wheel. And the cogs in the wheel that we're talking about are, let me take a statistic and try and explain it. The Highways Development Authority, which is basically the government body which lays down all these roads, typically, even during the COVID, has typically laid on an average a mile and a half kilometer, a mile and a half per day. So that roughly translates to about 5 kilometers or so a day of road stretch, right? So when you talk about transport, you're talking about multiple things. You're talking about the availability of transportation between point A and point B. That point B could be a rural area. That point B could be an area which is under service. That point B could be in Alaska, and so on and so forth. But we are talking about the transport, and then you're talking about the mode of transport, which is basically the emission factor and so on and so forth. You've got EVs. You've got mobility, which is which focuses on speed and so on and so forth. And then you have a third cog of the wheel, which is basically which tries to utilize the space and tries to rationalize the cost of that. So the answer to that is not as simple as we think it is. To me, the cost of transportation or the logistics of transportation or the understanding of where transport is or the future of transport is heading lies in multiple things, including the fact that people are not willing to be transported or to travel, so to speak. And how will that affect the overall travel industry or the transport industry and so on and so forth? So it's got a cascading effect. So people not traveling to Bangkok essentially means that the tuk-tuks of the Bangkok are not going to survive. If the tuk-tuks are not going to survive, then it essentially means that it has an impact on the economic factors and so on and so forth. So I feel that the future of transport, there are two perceptions. There are two views that you can take. One view is a view that, can I travel faster than the speed of sound? Can I, one of the hypotheses that he posed, Kyle, was that can I fly between London and New York in about 35 minutes? And the Concorde very brilliantly attempted that in 1999, and we saw how that ended in 2003. The answer to that is, I think the focus on speed and the focus on the extent to which we can reach is marginalized to an extent, to the fact that now we focus on whether we can travel in the first place. So I'm not really optimistic about this particular industry. Will we travel itself is going to be a big question mark, considering the fact that I am doing this virtually with you. I haven't traveled anywhere. So, will we travel at all? Is a question.
That is a very good question, and also, I mean, travel may be completely reshaped, and not just for a short term, but for the long term because of that. Bryony, I see you unmuted. Do you have a further comment you'd like to add?
I was just wondering how far we'll get in virtual reality, because that can also take away another reason for exploratory travel. If you can essentially visit somewhere, I don't think it's there yet. I personally haven't had an experience that's immersive enough or convincing enough that I would replace real exploration and travel with that. But it's another thing that could make travel less necessary in the future.
Yeah, so that's a good question. Let's ask. Dr. Tushar, I mean, any thoughts on virtual reality travel? I mean, we just completed E3, one of the biggest gaming, if not the biggest gaming conferences that happens every year in Southern California. And with that, we saw the release of some new virtual reality headsets and virtual reality platforms. But to Bryony's point, is that the future of travel? Will we start to see ourselves travel in places today and maybe in historics and in future worlds? And that's where we'll go. The majority, maybe once or twice a year, we'll actually go outside. What are your thoughts around that? Tushar, we'll start with you.
I feel that the original travel, which is to actually jump on a plane and go to Bora Bora and go to all the beautiful Cayman Islands and the good islands, that will never stop. It's a need of a human being, and the way travel has caught on with the advent of the mobile phone and internet in people's hands, they see others enjoying travel. So COVID might be a short-term bump, but it would never stop. It will only grow. This is my personal opinion. And VR and AR, yes, there was a research which came recently. I was reading about it. They polled 6,000 shoppers in China, India, and other countries, Asian and also Middle East, and 85% of Chinese said that they would like to see more AR and VR and robotics in store automation, in the stores. And that leads me to believe that if people want such experiences in retail, so they would want such experiences in travel as well. So they will go along side by side. I don't think the middle class, when it tastes the fruits of money and what it can do in terms of traveling, seeing new places, seeing new cultures, it becomes a kind of a habit, and people get very much used to it. And it's also a way out from the stress of the life in the cities, which is revolves around a lot of routine and a lot of work oriented. So my sense is that AR and VR will come in. Of course, they will have their own place, but the original travel which people do, it is here to stay.
All right, Tushar, anything to add? Or excuse me, Dr. Srikant, anything to add?
Absolutely. So I have a very contrarian view, and I have a view that pre-COVID statistics, right? The occupancy of flights, I believe 56% were business travelers. So I think the crucial question, the first question that we need to be asking ourselves is business travel here to stay? So if business travel is not here to stay, then your private travel is a question of a particular visitor making a particular visit. Imagine, I mean, let's be practical over here. Now, let's assume that COVID is gone. It's gone. It's erased, right? It's gone, and you're allowed to travel, and you have to pick a place to travel, and it would be Dubai. It could be Dubai. It could be Cambodia, and so on and so forth. But you will visit, and then what will happen? I mean, it will be a pre-COVID situation. Were you traveling quite often pre-COVID? Were you in were you like George Clooney and up in the air, up and down flights? No, because the business travel constitute the majority of the flight occupancy, and the travel is going to, I mean, once people realize the productivity which is there in online meetings, it's difficult to pull them for an offline meeting. Yes, I mean, people could possibly travel once and just shake hands and then say, yeah, the COVID is behind us. But after that, it's just going to be fruitless to travel per se. So I'm not very optimistic about it.
A very, very bearish view on travel, on Dr. Srikant. I respect that. But I also feel that there personally is a little bit of a pent up demand, and not just for short term, but long term. I mean, do we really see a world where travel just does not exist outside of the current, subsidy that you live in? I don't know. I think that, to your point, and this is a continual conversation, so we'll go down this rabbit hole for a minute and then we'll pull ourselves back out, because I think we all have views on this. But for me personally, it seems like the ability to do virtual meetings is a wonderful thing, but there is something about being in person as well, and building that physical relationship one-to-one closely with another, and or many, than say just a presentation, for instance, and not to dilute the point, but just to make that just distinction a little clearer. But nonetheless, I think you are pulling out one piece of advice I want to throw, or one point I do want to throw on, is a lot of business travel may have been one-to-one. You would go somewhere for one meeting and that was it. Now, I think you're calling it out well, is that type of travel actually may slow down and disappear, where you may travel to do bulk, but I'm not necessarily going to travel 4, 5, 6, 10 hours just to have one meeting with yourself, when we can just do this, for instance. So I think that part of travel and business travel definitely changes. Bryony, I see you have a point as well to add on.
Yeah, I think it depends on the context when it comes to business travel. On the one hand, a lot of us have realized how much we could have been doing virtually that was not really necessary to do in person. But on the other hand, sometimes nothing replaces the in-person meeting. So for us as a venture capital fund, one of the main criteria that we always put first was to make sure that we meet the founding team face to face, because only then can you get a real feel for the person. Is this person authentic? Are they truly representing themselves how they have, virtually or on paper? And I think that's something that doesn't always translate through a screen, to pick up these kind of nuances. So I'm somebody who always places a very high value on EQ, so on emotional intelligence and empathy in the workplace and in leadership. So I do try to kind of get this personal connection with the founders, because the people and the team are the number one most important factor when it comes to assessing whether or not we're going to take this bet into a new company. And that's been really difficult during the pandemic. And we actually localized our focus a lot in the last year and kind of prioritized all of the local deals in our pipeline, because we were still able to at least meet them outside. But that's something I think that face-to-face can never be beaten.
It's definitely true, and definitely also something tough that I think we are going to see still a slight adjustment towards as well. And pulling us out of that rabbit hole, because again, we could do a whole episode on that. But Dr. Srikant, thank you for bringing up that topic. I do appreciate it. Bryony, I want to come back to you. Data. I've let you sit on this for about 10 minutes, so coming back to you now. You've had plenty of time, no excuses. Data. The promise of the Internet of Things and the future of mobility and autonomous along with AI and everything else, has been leveraging data. Does the
Yeah.
future of transportation do that? And what does that even mean to build this data set and leverage it in some way for us?
Yeah. So this is a really interesting topic because on the one hand, I could either say I'm from the generation or maybe the one right after me is very much kind of integrated in the digital life, and they put their entire lives online. And there seems to be kind of no concept of privacy from, some maybe 10 years younger than me. But then living in Berlin in Germany, I've encountered the most privacy conscious society that I've ever seen. People even prefer to pay in cash rather than credit card so that there's no paper trail, so people are very, very wary about entering their data. So actually, when it comes to things like e-scooters or e-bikes, I know people that won't use them because they don't want to have to sign up and give their personal information, and not just payment information, but as in, about their person. So that's why data privacy and cybersecurity is so, so important for these companies who are providing travel and transport solutions to adhere to. And actually, one of our leading investments in our portfolio is a cybersecurity company. And this applies, of course, very strongly to IoT, because there's a lot of fear, I think, about, devices. Are they watching us? Are they listening to us? Is the data that I'm sharing anonymous? Or, how is it being used? Who's it being shared with? Because honestly, whoever really reads the long small print when you sign up to a new service? Very, very few people do. So we don't really know the answers to those questions. But yeah, at the same time, a lot of machine learning and AI is 100% dependent on having this data. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. So.
Well, and you're absolutely right on the unknowing. And Tushar, I'm going to come to you next on this as well. I mean, Apple does a very unique job, I will say, on kind of bringing some of this light in the recent advertising campaign, and how we have many apps, for instance, applications on our phones that are continually tracking what and how we do things. And that data is continually shared until it's not, which is their big marketing campaign, but we're using that as the example today. And that is kind of starting to bring this thought to light of like, well, if I go rent this scooter, no offense to scooter companies, where is this data going, right? When I went from point A to point B on that last mile, is that data, going to Amazon? Is that data going to another merchant? Is it going here versus there? How is it being monetized? And not necessarily that I'm not profiting off of it, but I don't know where it's going, which becomes a security issue for an individual, to your point, as well. But we'll come back to that in just a second. Tushar, you have a comment?
Yeah, I'll be okay. I have a short comment. I used to be a person who used to put every picture on Facebook. I used to travel. Each picture of mine used to be in a album on Facebook. And, there were people all have all kinds of views. So some in my family used to say, don't do that. It's not a right thing to do, because I used to add all professional connects also on my Facebook. Off recently, when I appeared in a startup news service, I got 5,500 connection requests on Facebook in 1 hour. And I started thinking, should it be, should I use it for my own family kind of thing, friends and family, or should it be business? Because I don't see any friend of mine on Facebook now putting pictures, or so I am very much concerned about privacy. I made all my albums private. I actually segregated my business account and my personal account, and I added those people, and then shifted my family and friends onto the other one. So I am very much concerned because you are talking to somebody on WhatsApp about something legal, and next moment you see everywhere legal advertisements popping on you, and it just makes you realize how far you have been tracked. And it is again a matter of each person's opinion, but for me, I feel that we should have boundaries set to how much data we allow. And I'm a bit concerned also about all this data being leaked out on the dark web and being used for AI and other purposes.
Tushar, all I have to say is it sounds like you're extremely popular on social media. I mean, 5,000 connections, not quickly.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
in 1 hour.
just that 1 hour, 60 minutes, ladies and gentlemen, 5,000
Yeah.
connections. Tushar is an influencer, if I may add. But jokes aside, I do want to come to close with today's panel. There's been a lot of good conversation on the future of travel and transportation, views of all sides, respectfully, as to if and where and how we may or may not travel in the future. Dr. Srikant, I want to start with you. Closing thoughts on the future. So looking ahead, the future of travel and transportation in your eyes, and how can everyone find you to connect further as well?
The future of transportation is never bleak as long as there is innovation. So I believe I may have misspoken when I was bearish in terms of my view about transport or travel as such. As long as there is innovation, there is going to be the travel industry is going to be a essential conduit, or is necessarily going to be a essential adjacent of other industry. So insofar as that, we see a lot of innovation coming. And uh, remember, travel, I mean, answering to Bryony's point, we came from postcards to emails to web conferences, WebExes, and then here. So we have traveled a long journey as such. So you can reach me at Dr. Srikant Patsarthi. That's only Dr. Srikant Patsarthi that you will find, who is a legal counsel. Everyone else will be an academician. I'm not an academician. I do hold a doctorate, but I'm not an academician.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Tushar, to you, closing thoughts on the future of travel and transportation, and where can everyone find you online?
I strongly feel that the petrol economy, oil economy is slowly withering away. These statistics show that. So the move towards electric vehicles. Even after COVID, all these companies are getting good amount of funding. So it shows the trend. Then on sharing economy, I would say that there are still some COVID related hiccups, but I'm sure it will pick up because economically it makes a lot of sense. And technology will keep on getting better and better, and it will be used more and more across the sector. I am Tushar Kansal. Usually, you won't find anybody else with this kind of name. Mostly available on LinkedIn. That's my name with my company's name, Kansaltancy Ventures. I can also be reached on my name, tusharkansal@gmail.com. And it is always a pleasure. Kyle, before ending, I would like to say something. I have been learning by watching your videos because I have a half an hour show on VCTV. So I've been learning moderation, how to speak alone by actually watching your shows. So thank you so much for the work you do. Thanks.
Thank you very much for the kind words and for watching. You're my one viewer, so I appreciate it. But thank you very much, Tushar. I do. Bryony, to you to close this out. Closing thoughts, and where can you be found online?
Thank you. So yeah, I do definitely believe in the rise of autonomous vehicles if they can get the ethics of the AI right, and if they can secure the data security that we need. And I also hope and believe that there will be a strong focus on sustainability, so looking at clean energy and greener ways to travel. So I do have my own website. You can find it bryonycooper.com. And of course, for any professional links, do find me on LinkedIn as well under Bryony Cooper.
Wonderful. Bryony, Dr. Srikant, and Tushar, thank you very much for your thoughts and insights today on the future of travel and transportation. To our audience, thank you so much for tuning in, for all the great comments of where you're tuning in, and for all your questions as well. For those who would like to connect with us, we do encourage it, but also please take time to reach out to each of us. And when you do, add context, where you heard us, where you met us, and what you would like to continue the conversation about, so we can make it the most effective between us all. virtually and maybe potentially physically in the future as well. That being said, I'm your host, Kyle Ellicott. It was an absolute pleasure again to host each and every one of you today. Big thank you to the Token team, to Maria and Hasmik for making today's episode possible. With that, everyone have a wonderful day, and we'll be back here tomorrow with more VCTV. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Bye.